So today's lecture is going to be on the progressives. So it's sort of a continuation of all the things we've talked about. So we had the populists before, and the progressives sort of take their ideas and sort of run with them with the middle class as their targets instead of just farmers. We've talked about muckrakers. We've talked about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Talked about a lot of people who were trying to change society at this time. So what the progressives did was they really were taking it to the next level, trying to involve politics. So we're going to be hitting Unit 4 and 5 still. So last lecture in this sort of mashup unit, Unit 5, questions 12, 14, 16, and 18 in the amendments chart, which is right below number 18. So first thing, so why did the progressive movement start? What was it? So the progressive movement was a social, political, and economic movement that usually is considered to run from like 1910 to the 1920s, so early 20s, but it started a long time. Sort of the roots of it started way back with the populists, a lot of people trying to make change. But why did it start? So for number 12, so it's the idea that government could be a tool for fixing society. So petitioning government, involving them, trying to get them to help regulate, trying to help solve a lot of the social, political, and economic issues of the time. So what did they want? So this is not in your packet, but it's a really important issue. So maybe like above 12, just like a quick list of the things they were targeting. So what did they want? So they wanted to sort of try to solve problems with the dirty cities, poverty in cities, the stuff that Jacob Riis photographed. They were targeting factory workers and labor, trying to help them out. Some were talking about lynching, segregation in the South, and not many on that issue. Child labor, alcohol and prohibition was another big one. Corruption in government, specifically like political machines like Boss Tweed, Tammany Hall, that whole thing. And also sort of big businesses as well. So cutting down these trusts. You have a lot of presidents at this time who are really going after big business, cutting down the trusts and stopping them from advancing and sort of hurting the economy as a whole. And the final really major thing was women's suffrage. So giving women the right to vote, really important issue at this time. So political changes. So we'll start with political. As I mentioned, there's a lot of really progressive presidents during this time. So Taft and Wilson are ones, but the main one's Teddy Roosevelt, who was a really very progressive individual. But political changes are starting at this time, so we're dealing with number 14. So why did progressive reformers want to add referendum, recall, and initiative to the political process? Well, first off, you need to know what these things are. So referendum is the state legislature proposes a law and citizens get to vote and decide. So this is like Amendment 1, where the legislature sort of adopts or proposes a bill that they want to pass, but they give it to the people to let them decide. Recall is removing a politician from office through majority vote. So the ability to get rid of a corrupt official and let the people decide if he's doing a really crappy job, we have the right to take him out of office because he's not doing what we want him to. And the last one is the initiative. So voters propose a bill for state legislature. So giving more power to the people, and they have the ability to pass their own law, to really sort of adopt what they think and try to get the state legislature to pass it. But why do they want all these things? I think it sort of refers back to the populist era, where they want to give more control to the people, except instead of just targeting farmers like the populists, they're targeting middle-class people, trying to get a larger voting base and really trying to get these things into action. So we've talked about political changes now to federal system, the banking, sort of that kind of aspect. So why did they need the Federal Reserve System? So if you flip over to 18, so at this time there are a lot of financial panics going on in the U.S. So the Panic of 1907 was a really big one that caused a lot of concern for the government. And they're sort of sick of this boom or bust cycle where you have these big sort of economic times, everybody's making money, but then there's like these issues that happen and everybody panics and they run to the bank and try to get their money out so they can make sure that it's still there, because people didn't trust banks the way they do now. And I mean, even now people still don't trust banks. Some people don't trust banks very much anyways. So it's sort of trying to stop these. So that would be the purpose. So make it a more stable monetary system. So what the Federal Reserve was going to do is it sort of backs up what the bank is doing. So if you need your money, the bank doesn't have it all, because if everybody runs the bank at the same time and wants all their money out, the bank's not going to have it all because they loan out money. That's how they make profit. That's how they run their business. What the Federal Reserve System did was back it up, give people more confidence, or hopefully give people more confidence that their money was safe and that the Federal Reserve could jump in. Here's more money for you to pay your members with, and then sort of we can get it back. So that would be the only thing you really need to remember for Federal Reserve System. It was trying to stabilize the monetary system in the U.S. So now we're going into politics. So presidential elections. So the 1912 election, one of my favorite elections. I think it's one of the most interesting ones out there. So it's really cool because it was really one of the only really big, tight three-way races. So it's actually 3 guys had a chance to win the election at this time. So we're on 16 at this time. So the 3 guys for 1912 were Teddy Roosevelt, who was running for the Bull Moose Party or the Progressive Party, and we're definitely going to come back to that. Taft, who was a Republican, and Woodrow Wilson, who was the Democratic nominee. So at this time, Teddy Roosevelt he'd already been 8 years in office, and Taft was like his protege. So Roosevelt was a Republican, very progressive individual, was there for 8 years, was done with his 2 terms, and basically was sort of pushing Taft to take over. The problem with it was, so for number 16, he didn't like what Taft was doing when he finally got to be president. So Taft was president for 4 years at this time during the 1912 election. So he was president from 08 to 1912. So he wasn't happy with what Taft was doing. Teddy was a very, very progressive president, liked the government to be involved and really start to really affect change. But he thought Taft was too conservative. Even though he did break up U.S. Steel, he did a lot more with trust, but he didn't target a lot of the things that Roosevelt found important. So Roosevelt decided he was going to jump back in. He was going to run again. Because at this time, there wasn't a rule that stated presidents could only run for 8 years. There was just a precedent that George Washington set up a long time ago. It was not a rule in the books. So he was jumping back in. So the effect of it was, though, that actually Woodrow Wilson wins the election because basically when Roosevelt jumps back in, he splits the Republican Party vote. So probably if just Roosevelt would have ran for the Republicans or just Taft would have ran, most people think that he probably would have won. Either one of the men would have won individually. But because they were both there, they split the vote for the Republicans. So people liked Roosevelt, people liked Taft. So they split the vote and Wilson wins because of it. So going back to this Bull Moose sort of name, so it's also called the Progressive Party. So that's like a campaign button there in the right hand or the right side of the screen. And where it comes from was Teddy Roosevelt. So Teddy Roosevelt was a really, really big activist at this time, and he was actually a big environmentalist. But the funny thing with it was he was also a big hunter. So right after he got done in 1908 with the presidency, he actually goes on this huge safari in Africa where he's going there and shooting all these sort of wild animals. So it's sort of this weird contradiction where he's like pushing for parks, he's pushing for saving the environment, but he's also like this big hunter. And so he's older when he's running in 1912, and like a reporter asked him, are you well enough? Are you healthy enough to run for the president? And basically he says, I am healthy as a bull moose. I am more than willing. So bull mooses are these huge creatures, really strong, durable animals, and he's saying he's as strong as one of those. And there's also another funny story with the bull moose term so Roosevelt was like this amazing sort of speaker, but he spoke for a long time. But at one of his rallies, so he was at sort of a rally, he was leaving, and an assassination attempt was attempted on him. And actually, a bullet was lodged like right near his rib cage, so almost hitting his heart. But he refuses to go home. He refuses to go to the hospital at that time because he had another speaking engagement after it. So when he was at this speaking engagement, he was like, "Okay, I know a lot of you have probably heard by now that there was an attempted assassination on me, but it takes a whole lot more than that to kill a bull moose." So he's sort of saying, look at this strength and everything I have, but it takes a lot more than a bullet to stop me. So this sort of reaffirms him as a strong candidate for some people because it shows his strength, his determination to win, but it also reaffirms that what a lot of people are thinking, this guy's sort of crazy, because he had this reputation of sort of being out there, because he was really an intense person, but he was also a little crazy at the same time. So that's the thing to remember with 1912 and for number 16. So the final thing we're going to go over today is the amendments chart. So right below 18, We're going to hit these really quick. So 16th Amendment is the ability to levy. So Levy. So it means they have the ability to do it. They can issue it. So they levy an income tax with the ability to change it. So that now your income, your personal income, can be taxed by the government. Because this is the progressive era. There are a lot of programs that are being instituted in the country, and this is their way of paying for it. So they're starting to now tax your income. And they have the ability to change that based on a rate that they decide. So 17, so this is dealing with the election of senators. So before this, a lot of people, or a lot of, even city mayors, state boards, let's see, who else? School board officials, all these kind of people, and even senators, so the actual senators for the country, were elected by state legislatures. So people didn't pick who ran for state legislation. They were elected by people within legislation, because at the time when our forefathers and founding fathers did this, they were thinking that was the most educated people in the country. They would make the best decisions. The problem with it was that there was a lot of so we've talked about sort of giving jobs to friends and things like that. So there was a lot of corruption that people thought was going on, and some of it was actually going on. So the 17th Amendment tries to solve this. So 2 senators from each state would be elected by the people to 6-year terms. So it's giving more power to the people, allowing them to vote, choose their own senators, get a better representation of the people they represent. So number 18. 18, this is a weird one because it was actually revoked 3 amendments later. So this is the prohibition of alcohol. So alcohol could neither be sold nor bought in the country. It was officially illegal to sell alcohol or buy alcohol. So states individually had done this before, but now it was a nationwide thing. So it was an attempt to stop spousal child abuse, a lot of the drunkenness that was affecting the country, and it was a big movement that a lot of people were pushing for. But the problem is it really sort of was a failure, because, as you know, if somebody says you can't do something, generally it just makes you want to do it even more. So basically, the only result of it was it really sort of increased crime, because more people were being sort of caught doing it, more crime rates are going up, and it was eventually taken away with the 21st Amendment. And then the final one here is the 19th Amendment, so women's suffrage. It's a really big sort of bonehead sort of why did this take so long decision. So states had already sort of issued these. So certain states, especially out west, had already said, okay, women have the right to vote, because generally those are more progressive areas of the country at this time. So they had already sort of done this, but now the 19th Amendment made it across the board, women have the right to vote, and it's no longer can you discriminate based on the idea of sex, what sex you are, to vote. So big moment for women at this time, and basically one that should have happened a long time before. So that is all for today, and all for this unit.